Welcome to the Orthocast. Today, our guest is Natalie. She grew up in the Russian Orthodox Church in America, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see, growing up in the church, how she made her faith her own, seeing all these new American converts and all these unique experiences that she has as a Cradle Orthodox. So, thank you so much for joining us. And my first question for you is, what was your upbringing like? Growing up in the Russian church.
So first off, thanks for having me on your show, on your channel. I think it's really cool what you're doing, this project, bringing all these like Orthodox people and sharing their stories like around the world and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed, what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, my story's gonna be a little bit different from, probably some of the others that have been shared on here. But I hope certain points of it, resonate with someone on here, my experience and, where I'm at in life. So my background. So I baptized and raised in the Russian Orthodox Church, not actually Russian. Most people will think I'm Russian. I do have a Ukrainian last name and everything, but no, I was adopted from Romania when I was a baby. My parents are actually from Brazil, but three of my grandparents were from Ukraine. So they went from, after World War II, they went to Brazil, and that's where my parents are from. They spent most of their lives down there, came to America, and then after some years, they adopted me. I have a brother, he's also adopted from Romania. So that's kind of my background. So I was kind of like tri-cultural, like I got, I'm American. Overall, I feel very American. But I grew up going to Brazil. I grew up, speaking Portuguese. So that's like a huge part of me. But of course, Orthodoxy, being like Orthodox and like that Russian part, that's kind of like where it kind of comes in, but not so much. Like it was more like being Orthodox, but we were in a Russian church because that's what my parents grew up with. That's what my grandparents were. So yeah, it's kind of like my background, a little bit about myself. I spent a good chunk of my life in the Russian church. I went to confession, received communion about 3 to 4 times a year. And that was from like when I was 7 to like high school. Because then you kind of reach a point where, it's kind of up to you. Your parents are not telling you all the time, you need to go to confession. You kind of reach a point, and too when you should be going. So, but that was really big. Church every week. Names days are pretty big in my family. We celebrate them like little birthdays. We give each other little gifts. We go out for dinner. So it's really nice, like a little birthday. Growing up in the old calendar, of course, I celebrated Christmas January 7th. And that's also my dad's birthday. So it's kind of like a twofold, celebration for us. But, the 25th, December 25th, was remembered, acknowledged, in our household. We have family and friends that also celebrating on the 25th. So we always make a point to remember them. We have like a nice little meal, fast friendly, Maybe make a little toast for them. Remember all the Christians that are celebrating. That's when we put up our tree. That's when we start decorating. So we kind of get into the Christmas spirit. But I never grew up celebrating on the 25th. Like the 25th was always very kind of like secular. With like some years when I was a kid, I would open up presents, so I wasn't left out. Yeah, so overall, like the church was, definitely a huge part of my life growing up. Like we took it seriously in my family. Just maybe a little bit of background on the parish because, I've seen so much change. So like growing up as a kid, it was mostly like old Russians, like old babushkas, the old ladies, a lot of old people from that generation, that left Russia, after World War II or before. Actually, there were a lot of people from China because a lot of Russians went to China after World War I. So we had like that generation. And then like with my generation, like those of us, born in the 90s and stuff, we were like children, grandchildren of like the immigrants that left like after World War II or during World War II era. So we all spoke English. I think for the most part, we all felt very American. Like there wasn't this like, oh, you're Russian, you're not.
Yeah.
So like I didn't really feel anything. Like growing up, it wasn't like a big deal. And then when I was a teenager, I knew I was adopted, right? My parents told me when I was a kid. I didn't really care. Like, I didn't fully understand. I was just like, oh, okay, like you didn't give birth to me. Okay, that's cool, but you're still my mom, right? Like I didn't really care, I never made a big deal about it. Nobody else did. And then when I was a teenager, kind of came back in my mind. I said, okay, well, I am like really different. Like I realized, okay, I'm not really Russian. Like I would tell people, oh, I'm Russian and stuff. My parents like, no, you're not actually. We're not actually, because there's really a lot of stuff we don't do that's like Russian. And I came to that realization when I was a teenager. So the church that I went to, the Russian church I grew up in, we had a church school,
Hmm.
but that started when I was a teenager, and it was really fun the first year. Like, most of my friends were going. We're all just like, well, why not? Let's all go. We're all going. So it was really nice. We spent the whole weekend together, and then like the second year, a bunch of like random to me, so like random Russian people were showing up. Now they may or may not have been Orthodox, which is kind of interesting. Like they just put their kids in the church school because they're learning Russian, or maybe
Yeah.
they want them to have some sort of spiritual upbringing, but they might not be like practicing for whatever reason.
Hmm.
So we had a lot of those people coming in, a lot of those families. And I don't know, there's like a disconnect. Like I didn't really connect with them. Like I realized, oh wow, I really am like kind of different. And I never really made a big deal about it, but it did like affect me.
Yeah.
And I had some other like weird experiences like that where people were like, oh, treating me kind of different because I couldn't speak Russian. I didn't speak Russian. Now, growing up, I heard the Russian language. Like my grandparents, when they were still alive, they were speaking some Russian. But,
Hmm.
my parents had their reasons for not teaching me and my brother Russian. But of course, when you're around the language, you do pick up words and phrases, but very basic. Like I can't even make a sentence. I can't tell you the sky is blue or
Yeah.
that flower is beautiful. It's more of like, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Or, oh, I learned, some words and stuff when I was a kid. But, Portuguese and English are like my main languages. My English, I'm fluent in. Portuguese, like proficient. But, I
Yeah.
didn't grow up going to Russia. None of that stuff. We didn't have any of that connection. So
Yeah.
being around these like Russians, like, people that, straight out of Russia or straight out of Ukraine, or, maybe they've been in America a good 15, 20 years, but they're still very Russian. Like that's like directly where they came from. And, my parents, in Brazil might have grown up hearing stories of what it was like in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, but they weren't there. Like they didn't grow up in a communist country. They didn't grow up under that. So they don't know what that's like. So
Yeah.
even for them, like meeting these Russians were like, kind of new for them as well. We're all kind of navigating this, this new generation
Yeah.
of Russians that are, returning to the faith, or might have been like secretly Orthodox, but they didn't know. Like there were some people who were baptized like secretly in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but didn't know because there was no certification, of their baptisms. And,
Wow.
there are a lot of people that do like genuinely come back to the faith, but,
Hmm.
they're very Russian, like, being like in these ethnic churches. I think overall there's this like very strong, like, ethnic, I'm blanking,
Ethnic
sorry.
pride. Yeah, they're just like they
Yes,
want to
exactly.
want to maintain their cultures. And yeah, some parishes do fall into where it just becomes like a cultural institution where they're just trying to preserve their culture, and then some are they just care about the religion, which is good. That's what's essential. But I think ideally you can have both. Like that's what I love about my parish is it's very welcoming to converts from day one. The religion is first, but we also get to experience these beautiful Serbian tradition. So what was the critical moment for you where you like made your faith your own? Like you were going to confession, receiving communion, but when did you realize like this is actually true and you actually want to be Orthodox and devote your life to it?
So I would say my early 20s. So at about 20, I mean, I had some, experiences with like the Russian church, like people within the community. Not so much. I wouldn't say the church itself, like, clergy's been fine, going to confession, communion with my spiritual father, everything's been fine. Like he's known me my whole life. He knew some of my struggles, he sympathized with me.
Yeah.
He also from a Russian background, but same thing. He wasn't raised, as far as I remember, off the top of my head, like not like super Russian.
Hmm.
So he kind of, I think, could sympathize with me with that. Where he knew my family, he's known my family for a long time. He knows everything about me. So he would help navigate those struggles I was having with
Yeah.
trying to navigate all that, and
Hmm.
maybe hating people along the way because they treated me bad. Learning to forgive and love and all that stuff. So he knew all that stuff I was going through. And in my early 20s, like, I think, I know at some point in my mind, I like thought about not being Orthodox, but then there were times where I was like, wait, I know there are options out there. There are other churches, there are other,
Hmm.
jurisdictions out there. But at this point in my early 20s, of course, I knew the Romanian churches, there were Greek churches,
Hmm.
Serbian churches. So I knew like here, like Sacramento area, right? Like we're very blessed to have so many different churches. But I didn't really know anybody from any of the churches because, like, the Russian church at the time when I was growing up, they weren't doing a lot of like pan, Orthodox events. Like we weren't doing festivals, we weren't doing that stuff. But I remember like in my teen years seeing some people from OCA, I'm pretty sure some people from Serbian church as well, coming to our church for like our feast days and other like smaller events where we're hosting like visitation of an icon or a speaker. So definitely it was kind of around 15 or 16. I was like, okay, there's all these people, where are they coming from? But I didn't know, I didn't really question. I
Yeah.
heard, oh, they're coming from this church here, but where, right? So yeah, so knowing that there were other churches out there, there was a community out there. I know in my early 20s, about 20 going on 21, I joined a group on Facebook, which is probably now defunct. I don't know what happened to it, but it was like a young adults, Sacramento area young adult group, and I like kind of put myself out there, said, hi, I'm so and so, and I had some people add me, and I was talking to one guy, and like we kind of like had seen each other and maybe knew each other, but not really. And he was like, oh, I go to OCA church, come visit my church, if you're looking for something else. And I was like, yeah. So I was like, I knew I wanted to make the faith my own. That like I want to understand what's going on in church, because you go to Russian church, it's mostly like old church Slavonic.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea what was going on. And, I reached the point where I was getting distracted in church. I wasn't paying attention. I was sitting a lot. I was like, oh, like, okay, whatever. Like I knew when to stand. I knew when to like sit. Like my parents weren't so strict on like the standing. Of course, like at certain times of the service, we need to stand, we need to pay attention. But there were other times where it's like, okay, now you can sit. So it's like kind of in between, like, like before the creed or before the Lord's Prayer. Okay, you can sit a little. So I was still like a kid or a teenager, but as I got older too, I was like, okay, I think I should stand a little bit more, force myself a little.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be somewhere where I could understand, what was going on. The only thing I could understand that the Russian church was when they read the epistle and the gospel in English. They do both Russian and English, and then the sermon would be Russian and English. And that's kind of only like what I knew.
Yeah.
I mean, of course I already knew some stuff about the church, about the liturgy, but I didn't know what they were saying. And I wanted to know. But then it's interesting too, at the same time, in some way, I also kind of liked not knowing what they were saying, because there was something like mystical, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to say, I don't know how to explain it unless you've kind of experienced it. Like sometimes I liked not knowing what they were saying, but I would pay attention. I'd be like, wow, like I feel something. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, just the way that they say it. Like I love listening to the Russian chants. I don't know I don't know most of what they're saying except the Gospodi Pomilois. And I like watching the Russian services just because there's something like true there. But yeah, it is very important that we're actually like understanding and participating in it. And so when you start finding out, hey, there's like
so I left that parish because of the changes I was seeing. I wanted to grow my faith, make the faith my own. But I am very appreciative of what the Russian church has taught me, the values it's instilled in me. It gave me the foundation to grow my faith, to want to raise my family in the faith. And I have the Russian saints and my spiritual father to thank for.
there's there's much more to Orthodoxy. Like there's one expression, which is the Russian expression, which is great. But you also found out, about the OCA, and you start going there. Is that when you start to see like a reverse culture shock? Because, you're like all Russians, and then now it's all Americans. Is that what happened?
Yes. So I went in, and it was like, wow. Like, I mean, I loved that I was all in English. But yeah, it was kind of like a reverse culture shock. It was very like American to me, because during the sermon everybody would like sit on the floor, like respectfully, like sit on the floor, because this church, they don't have like pews, they don't have chairs. They have like little like benches around the church and stuff. And I was like, I want to sit on the bench. I remember one time, for the first few times I went, I wanted to sit on the bench, but everyone sat down. I'm like, I'm not going to be rude and like scooch in,
Yeah.
But I was like, I guess I'm going to sit on the floor. But they have like really nice carpets, like really nice rugs out there. So it's respectful. People not just throwing themselves on the floor, everyone's sitting nice. So I was like, okay, I'll sit down. And no, and I really liked it. I mean, I think I had kind of already known the priest. I already knew who some of the fathers were. So I was like, okay. I was like, oh, this is the church they go to. Okay, so... But no, it was a very welcoming, like very open compared to like what I had experienced in the Russian church. Because also like by the time I left the Russian church, like the culture of the parish like really changed too, right? Because we're getting a lot of people straight out of Russia, Ukraine, all the ex Soviet Union countries. Soviet countries, they're all coming to America. They had a whole completely different upbringing. They're bringing all this culture. It became, unfortunately, I think became more of like a culture club thing, like, yes, like, they're Orthodox, but it became more of like a culture thing. And I kind of was picking up on that. Like even my parents have kind of picked up on that.
Mm.
That's kind of too where I was like, yeah, I need to go like somewhere else. Like I just want to be Orthodox. And so it was really nice going to OCA and, hearing it all in English and hearing, the hymns and the chants in English. And they do the same tones as the Russian church. So it was very familiar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, people was very open. My experience with like American churches before that was like a Lutheran school. So I went to Catholic and Lutheran schools when I was a
Mm.
kid. So like growing up, there was a time in my life where I thought they were just Orthodox and just Catholics, and I found that they were Lutherans. So I think in some ways it kind of reminded me of that. Like Lutherans, especially, were very like open. They wanted you to, read the Bible, know the Bible, the hymnals and stuff. So I really liked that when I was in Lutheran school. So it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, like very open. They always every Sunday they have like a little lunch after a little meal, and through my friend, I was introduced to others, and I found out some other, families or other, individuals that go to the OCA church also came from similar backgrounds as me, like Russian background, or in that sense, a more stricter, background. Because OCA to me was was way more laxed, a little more like, than the Russian church.
Yeah.
Um, but I really did. I still felt like, the seriousness of the faith, like the
Hmm.
piety. I felt that from, from the OCA community. People were serious about their faith. One thing I liked to, like the children, like the families were all like together in the church. Because unfortunately, from what I had seen, just what I've seen, I'm not speaking for all Russian churches, right? But from what I've seen, the kids are like running in and out of the church. They're not really paying attention as well. It could be because of the old Slavonic, but I seemed like the parents weren't really like, stopping them and maybe trying to explain to them what's going on, like why we're here. But it seemed like an OCA church. Because it's all in English, the parents are like, this is, I think, they're explaining to their kids, like, this is why we're in church. Like they stayed in church. Yeah. They had their little books and stuff, but they were quietly, in the church. They have like their church school. So that was nice. So they were able to like stay in the church, and it wasn't anything like cultural. It was like just, orthodoxy, like, explaining the church to the kids. And I thought that was really nice. Yeah, just people just being really nice. And I was like, oh wow, like, this is really American. Like people sitting on their, oh, people laughing in church. Yeah, that's like almost unheard of in the Russian church.
Wow.
like when the priest does like
Oh,
announcements at
oh,
the end,
homily.
and he
Oh,
says
yeah.
something kind of like, like, I've seen in Russia that people might smile or a little, little chuckle, but like, oh, like that. I was like, whoa, like we're clapping and
Yeah.
laughing in church like that. For me, I was like, oh, okay. Or like like a happy announcement, like a marriage or a birth of a child, or expecting, people clapping, and so like I was like, wow, okay, we're clapping, we're laughing in church. Like I was like, woo, like this is weird. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of weird at first.
Yeah. It's
So just like stuff like that. Yeah,
uh
like just very open, very warm, genuine.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to like hear that, because I've heard that like different cultures like express things in different ways. And of course with every single church there's going to be some ones that are more ethnic clubs. I've heard that
Right.
about, Greek, Russian churches. But again, there's also churches that are very open to converts, and I think we should just be open with this fact. Is like not every church is going to be perfect. Every church is going to maybe they're persuaded more one way, but the true faith is there. But that's why we should talk about these issues to make sure that everyone feels welcome in whatever church, because orthodoxy is universal. We have the same faith everywhere. But you just found it was interesting, and you felt more welcomed in that specific church. It was just a different experience for you, and that really helped grow your
Mhm.
faith, because you were able to connect more and understand more, and feel more belonging.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I was still going back to my Russian church. So the first, I don't know, stint or whatever I had with the OCA church, this was 8 years ago. This was 2015. I went for like a year and a half, like straight. I was getting to know people. It was actually within the first year I was going, that's how I met like Marianne, from Serbian church. It was through my friend. So I met her during that
Mm.
time. I was able to meet people from Serbian church at that time. So it was actually it like opened a lot of doors. Like I got to meet like so many people and have some experiences that I wasn't having in the Russian church. So, the first started going to OCA church. It was back in 2015. I was there. My first like stint, if you will, was like a year and a half. So I went like straight a year and a half, met so many, neat people like in the church, through my friends there, met people from other churches. But after a year and a half, I was just like, I don't know. I was like, this is like too American for me. Like, there's like a part of me, like, I guess you could say, like, you can take the, girl out of the Russian church, and you can't take the Russian church out of the girl. So there was like that. For some reason, I felt like, no, I think I need to go back.
Yeah.
So then I went back to the Russian church for another like year and a half. And then I still came out of it like, I think I'm going to go back to OCA. So then I went back to OCA, and then I was there about 3 years up until like 2020, like summer of 2020. I don't really go there that, I don't go there that much anymore, but, still a big part of me, I've gone to confession many times with one of the fathers there. I really liked his spiritual advice, his, advice on life and how to deal with some things I was going through. He was, younger on the younger end. So, no, I had good times. I still have friends there, but then, I started going to the Serbian church. Overall, I had a good experience at OCA. Like I said, I still have friends, I still have acquaintances from that time, but I don't know. I also, again, kind of felt like another change. I was like, I think I need to go like somewhere else. And like I said, I already knew people from the Serbian church. I had actually gone there like once or twice as a kid. So I knew that church was always available, but I was actually, I don't know, kind of apprehensive of going. So I was like, oh, it's another ethnic church. They might be like weird with me or whatever. And and then I went and I was like, oh, like you said, like they're very, open to like, converts, or even just like I found, there's a lot of Russian people that go there, a lot of Romanians, a lot of people from other Eastern European, like Slavic backgrounds. So, I kind of felt at home there as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think the Serbian church is really interesting, and it's because you'll see like Romanians, Ukrainians, Russians, even though Ukrainians are going to have some apprehensions about going to the Russian church, and there's like a lot of things, but the Serbian church, it brings a lot of people together, and it is like I would say like the Russians are probably the most traditional, and then like Serbians are next. Like we still like maintain everything, and we're very strict, but it's a little bit a little bit more chill.
definitely, yeah.
And so, growing up in Orthodoxy, you thought it was just more of an ethnic thing, but now seeing all these people convert to Orthodoxy and start to come to the church, I know so many people who go to Russian churches, they have amazing experiences. So how has it been seeing like all these new young people like coming to Orthodoxy like in the past few years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, of course, like everybody has different experiences. I, unfortunately, I had really great experiences growing up in a Russian church, but then when I got older, I had a lot of ups and downs, and, it was probably, just, that was just part of my spiritual journey. Like there's some things that happened to me where I still don't know to this day why certain things happen. My spiritual father will kind of help me, go through that. Like, okay, see why this happened, maybe just had to happen for a reason, forgive, move on, love these people. But, I want, even if somebody goes to a Russian church, like I might be like, I don't really want to go anymore, but I'm like, I don't stop people, I'd be like, okay, fine. You want to go to a Russian church? I'm like, that's you, they might have a fulfilling, spiritual experience there. And I do know of people who have like, so yeah, like really in the last 5 years, my parent, the Russian church, I still go, back and forth there. My parents still go there. So I have some friends that are there. Like it's really changed. Like, again, I'll say the parish community is now mostly Russian people, like straight out of Russia, like that older generation, they're dying, they're, passing away. It's been about, over 100 years since they've been born, so they're passing away. Now it's mostly that generation that came, after communism. Then we got a lot of converts. I got a lot of converts, a lot of Americans from various backgrounds, white Americans, Asian Americans, you name it, they have it, right?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, and mostly men. Let's say mostly men.
Yeah.
And it was like interesting getting to kind of know them a little bit, like, how they came to Orthodoxy, where they came. It's interesting. It seems like some of the men seem a little like, I don't know, like secretive about it. They don't want to tell you everything. Like I was like, I want to know, like, tell me. And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. But it's also at OCA church too, like the last, I mean, they're always getting converts, right? They're always getting
Yeah.
new people to the church. Inquirers, I want to say. They're getting a lot of inquirers into
Yeah.
the faith who then, may or may not, convert. The OCA too in these last maybe 2 or 3 years really have gotten a lot of converts, and it's a good mix. It's like men and women,
Hmm.
their families.
Yeah.
So that was kind of nice seeing that. Like, going to OCA, I got to know some like young women, just women, and that was always interesting. They seemed a little more open, to their stories, telling why they came to the faith. And a lot of them came from already Christian backgrounds, but, wanted more. And they felt like, their church, wasn't the true church, or, like they're trying to find that true church,
Yeah.
and then they find out it's orthodoxy.
Hmm.
And, so that was kind of nice. They were already coming from Christian backgrounds. The men, it's kind of like a mix, some coming from, non-Christian background,
Hmm.
atheist or something else completely, or some coming again from that Christian background but wanting more, knowing there's something more out there. So it's just so different from like what I grew up with. Definitely a lot more converts. It's again very just interesting to see where they're coming from, um just like their background, but just like background in general, like like they're coming, like some of them are coming through the church, you know from like a theological or like scholastic background, like they were studying all this,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh, this seems right, coming off very strong on the theology, on the church history, and just other coming through more simple means, so it's just very interesting. Like definitely just a lot has changed,
Yeah.
like almost 30 years of my life.
Hmm.
So
And I think the good thing is that all these people who are coming to Orthodoxy, like they've seen the other churches just give in to all the errors, and they see the truth in the Orthodox Church, and they've maintained all this. And so when they're coming to the Orthodox Church, they want to be like Orthodox in every way possible on the social issues,
absolutely,
on the theology
absolutely.
issues, and that's why a lot of converts are some of the most outspoken people, especially online. And we have we're getting more convert priests like Father Josiah Trenum, Father
Hmm.
Peter Heers, Father Mikolai, Living Orthodox. We have other people like Jay Dyer, David Erhan. We have all these great voices online, and I'm really excited for the future of the Orthodox Church, especially in America, since we're it's going to grow a lot, and then people are going to also experience these great traditions and these great cultural things. And like you were talking about, now that Orthodox, we are working more as a unified church, like having pan-Orthodox, like saying, hey, there's all these festivals in our cities. Like we should go together and we should support each other and like act like a unified church. So I'm optimistic about the future of Orthodoxy. Yeah. So how has it been? Seeing all these like Orthobros. You're dating you're dating
There.
one. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's been interesting. Yeah, like what you were just saying, I also wanted to say, yeah, a lot of the converts, like they know like a lot about the church, like they know the church history, they know the theology, and obviously they need to know that to convert, like the theology, like you need to know, like what you're believing. Where us cradles, we really do take it for granted.
Yeah.
Like most of us, like for me, growing up as a child, I did not have like church school. I did not have that kind of foundation that's very like Protestanty or Catholic or whatever, like sitting kids down and teaching them, why you're Christian, why you're
Yeah.
Orthodox, like, why does the church do what it does. And, I'm not blaming anybody for, at that point, my childhood at that time of the church maybe just wasn't a need. It was just kind of expected, that you're Orthodox
Yeah.
and that's it. Maybe, I don't know for sure if that is that wholly the mentality,
I think it may
but
also be the economic circumstances they're coming from, like them coming from the Soviet countries. Like they didn't have the
absolutely,
most
yeah.
resources or education. They're trying to preserve their culture, and part of their culture is also the faith. Like there is true believers, but they didn't always have the the they couldn't always like teach the faith. But I think that's changing. Is like now we're making sure that we're like catechizing properly, like converts
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like cradles, because that's so important. That's why I'm glad we're having this interview, because it's so important to retain that core demographic, the core Orthodox people, like the Russians, Greeks, Romanians. Like we want to keep them too. We don't want them to just replace them. We want to grow together.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And of course, that's so true, where they're coming from, what their backgrounds are. They might not have been able to go to church, it might have been illegal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially like the Russians, right? And it took me a really long time actually to like kind of understand that background, like where these people were coming from. Cause like, I mean, as a kid, like we didn't really talk about that because my grandparents, left Russia after World War
Yeah.
II. like I said, like my dad, and my parents were in Brazil, so that was a whole different, culture, whole different place. They
Yeah.
weren't like, knowing really what was going on as well in the Soviet Union. Like they didn't know if people were able to go to church or not. So, like I know my grandma in the 30s and 40s went like underground, like a catacomb kind of thing. I think the priest would come like, dressed very, civilian like, would bring, the Eucharist, I think, and like do it really quickly in the house. But, they had to be very careful.
Yeah.
So I know my grandparents, as far as I know, from what I remember, did not grow up going to church regularly. Even my parents in Brazil did not go to church regularly, because it's not like here where, there's like Orthodox churches all over. Over there, it's more like in the major cities. And
Yeah.
there are times where my parents were not living in the major cities, so they couldn't go to church regularly. Parents growing up in Brazil, they didn't have Orthodox churches in like in their neighborhoods like we might have here in America. It was in major cities, and then there were times where they weren't living in the major cities, so they had to drive really far to get to church, or it was just too far away, so they weren't going regularly. And then it wasn't until like the 70s and 80s when they came to America they started going to church more regularly, because my dad was living in San Francisco, there's like so many churches. Then my mom came here, got married to my dad, they were living in Sacramento, there's already so many churches. So even my parents growing up didn't have that go to church all the time thing. So but I think even then, like, I think my dad especially like instilled a lot of the faith in me. Like he knew what he knew, he passed on to me. So I guess the whole point I'm trying to say, the conclusion to that is that, there's a lot of us cradles, again, for, as reasons that I've listed, various reasons that we may not know much about the church history. We may not know like why we do what we do. Like, what does this mean in, the liturgy or the service, etc. And it wasn't until I was 13, 14 that, we had these Russian schools, but, I know a spiritual father, it was shout out Father Paul, would have these, these classes. And I still have the book to this day. And, I still read it once in a while if I have like questions. It's called Law of God, really good book, and just breaks down like Old Testament, New Testament, the liturgy, some other services, very, very well written book. And then like a lot of it kind of came to me. I was like, oh, like that's why we do what we do. And, he would like test us on it, But yeah, so like, again, like converts, need to know all that to, come to the faith.
Yeah.
Like they need to like know what they're not getting themselves into. I know it sounds kind of harsh, but, they need to know why, the spiritual father wants to know if they're ready, So for us as cradles, like a lot of us, we really have taken that, taking that for advantage. But we are learning, a lot of us, myself, there's a lot I don't know. And, some converts are like, well, you don't know because you're cradle. And I'm like, I didn't, because I didn't have like that foundation growing up, like that church school. Like what I knew is what my dad knew, what my parents knew, and kind of passed down onto me. So like, yeah, like growing up, it was just, like I kind of knew why I was Orthodox, but not really. But I kind of, when you're a kid, you kind of go along with it. But again, like you say, like I say, you reach a point where, you do, make the faith your own. And yeah, they just know so much. And yeah, I really did learn a lot from like from converts as well. Like, it's like it's a give and take. Like they learn from us, we learn from them.
Exactly.
Like I think, we should like just meet each other where we are. Like if I don't know something, I might be like, oh, but why is it like that? And I want maybe an explanation. But sometimes the guys will come off a little condescending, and it's not really nice. It's like, hey, and I'll explain, I didn't have XYZ growing up, and they're like, oh, okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of going into that, like the Orthobros, like the internet orthodoxy, like this is all kind of new to me.
Yeah.
I guess knew sort of about internet orthodoxy, but it wasn't really a thing. Like 10 years ago, it wasn't really a thing. I was just, on social media, I was just on like Facebook or YouTube, just talking to my Orthodox friends or whatever, like my cradle friends. So I don't know if they knew anything. I wasn't, on like Twitter or like Instagram or all, we didn't have that stuff. So
yeah,
really, I would say really in the last like 5 years, I think, it's really blown up. Like I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
It wasn't really until I went to like the OCA church that people will talk about like, Jay Dyer and all these guys and stuff. And I'm like, who the heck are these people? And I like would watch them. But it was like, for me, I just didn't, like, I still don't connect to them. Like, I'll still watch some of their stuff every now and then. It's just, I don't know. It's like I just don't connect, and like I get it. Like maybe some people need that kind of like I don't know, not influence, but they need those kinds of people to tell them things, and that they connect to them. But like for me, it's just like it's just I just don't connect with that.
I think
So I'm
everyone,
learning how to navigate that. I'm learning how to
yeah,
navigate it and see what's, legit and what's not, like we don't need to get hung up over this issue, but oh, this is really interesting. Okay, let
yeah.
me see what they're saying.
Yeah, I think everyone needs someone that kind of speaks their language,
Exactly.
speaks to them. Like my videos, not everyone is gonna like because it's mainly
Hmm.
for kind of like young Generation Z people who like memes and like straight to the form. But other people are gonna like different things. But I think there's something in Orthodoxy that everyone can connect with. And what was that for you? Like some people, they really like the Old Testament. They like reading about the prophets and these great miracles. They like reading about the New Testament, the life of Jesus and the apostles, or maybe the early church, the ecumenical councils, or maybe like more modern saints. And I think that's so great about Orthodoxy is it is living, it's producing saints, and we can have a connection to these recent saints. And like you were saying. From you being from like Sacramento, like Northern California has actually got a lot of like local saints, pretty much like Saint Sebastian of Jackson, Saint John
Hmm.
Maximovich, Seraphim Rose, like
Absolutely.
all these great people. So, what was it for you? Like, what's
That's a really great question. I was just thinking, like, I know even as a kid, interestingly, I don't know, I liked reading about the Romanovs when I was a kid,
oh
like, especially like, Anastasia, Saint.
yeah
And this was like before I had my, ups and downs with the Russian church, with the Russian community, but I always liked reading that stuff. Like, I always liked history. Like, I wouldn't say like I'm a history buff, but I do like history. I like that stuff. So I would read stuff about them when I was a kid, like little books or like historical fiction about them. And then, now like as an adult, I read some stuff about like a Romanian saints or, not exactly saints as well, but just like, like spiritual fathers, like monks,
yeah
spiritual mothers. So I have some books that are like focusing on like, people that are in the Romanian church or have influenced the church. They were, persecuted during communism. They were martyred. They may or may not be saints, right?
yeah
Like we have, a Seraphim Rose who's, not a saint, but he's still very, significant, in the Orthodox Church. I know there's a movement, if you will, to, canonize him. So people like that, like I've always liked that ever since I was a kid. And I think just as I got older too, like Marianne also like encouraged that in me. She had some books about like Romanians and
yeah
I went and read them myself, like, so that was really nice. So like stories like that I liked. Like I was
mm,
like, wow, like these people went through these things and these are like my people in a way, it was nice. I got to learn a little bit more about the Romanian church and, their struggles, through, communism especially and a little bit modern days, but mostly like historical. So like stories like that I always liked. It was kind of grounded me and yeah,
yeah.
so like stuff
Is,
like that. Yeah.
is there any books that you want to recommend?
So I have this book called Royal Monastic Princess Elena of Romania. There's this book right here. I love this book. I actually been wanting to reread it. So, maybe after this interview, I'll go start rereading it. This is a great book. Um, it's a story of she became Mother Alexandra. She came to America and founded a monastery. Let me see right here. First English language Orthodox women's monastery in the United States.
Wow.
Orthodox Monastery of the Transfiguration in Elwood City, Pennsylvania. So this was actually a book that Marianne, shout out to Marianne, I love her, recommended to me. She had a copy and she was like, I'm not giving you it because it's like precious. And I was like, okay. But I actually found this at a Greek Orthodox church. Like I wasn't even looking for it. I was there at a festival and I saw it and it was the only copy for me.
Wow.
And I just loved it. Like this is like a biography written by Bev Cook.
Mm,
I believe, yeah, Bev Cook. So this is not like her actual autobiography. She
mm,
has her own autobiography as well, but I really like this one more. Just details like her life. There's great pictures. There's great, maps and charts of like history and stuff. So, I really recommend this book, everybody, if you want to read about like Romania and, Romanian Orthodoxy. And then another one, I haven't gotten through all of it because it's like very like spiritual. I think you need to be in the right place, spiritual mind and soul, and body to read it. But Elder Cleopa, I know he's very, important, prominent in Romanian Orthodoxy. I've gone through a little bit of this book. Again, I might not have been in the right place or the right time to
mm,
read it. I think with Orthodox books, I think there, you know, some people need to be in the right place in the right time. And I probably wasn't, but I went through it a little bit, and it was just very interesting. It's just his like sayings, like things that he said, a little bit of his history. I have another book that's like more condensed. That's just like about him again, another biography, which is also really good. It's called, let me get it. So this one's called Shepherd of Souls, and it's Lives and Teachings of Elder Cleopa. And it's a little more condensed from the last book. This was actually a book that my dad had for many, many years. I don't know exactly when he got it. I don't know if it was before I was adopted or after. I don't know, but this is, you know, a really nice book. I read this years ago, and I really liked it. I got a good, good feel of who he was, and you know his influence in Orthodoxy, and yeah. So like books like that, I always like books like that. Right now, I have these are the ones I have on like Romania, but like I said, I've even read stuff about Russia. I've read some other ones. Even after some of the stuff that I went through with the Russian church, I went back and read some stuff that I just separated with the Russians or whatever. But like the struggles they're going through, I think we can all learn.
Yeah.
You know, they were like seriously persecuted. You know, they were martyred. Like it's not like stuff that we're going through. It's like we need to be humbled and stuff. So like I still appreciate, you know, books like that. I like reading that. So I mean, like I said, I like history, so I like going back and seeing what people in our church were going through, and
Yeah.
again how we can learn from them.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for your time. This was a very good interview, and God bless.
Thank you.
Yep.